on YouTube, so you can watch us there as well. We're trying to just change up the way we're doing things at the moment. So we're in a different office today to do this presentation rather than a studio. And we're presenting to you about the big thing today is we're looking at the changes to the Portugal Golden Visa Scheme, which are coming in this month, August 23. So welcome to this live webinar. We're also streaming in a Twitter space. If you want to have a look there, I call it Twitter still, although you might call it the X Factor. And you can find out more there by going along to our profile program says. So before we get into the day's topic in detail, summarize that, and anybody with any questions on the Twitter space or YouTube, we can then get you those answers and find out more information. ProAct is for expats living and working abroad, relocating overseas. So when you're relocating overseas, that might involve overseas property, might involve business, or it could just involve connecting with friends or seeking new opportunities abroad. So we cover all those different things. Let's have a look at some of the topics that are coming up in the news in the last week. In the British media, there's quite a lot going on about people getting caught short with their time that they're spending in Europe. Many expats around Europe have holiday homes in the Mediterranean area, be that Portugal, Spain, Greece, France, Cyprus. And they're finding that the rules have changed and they've actually got a bit of difficulty now. So now the EU is applying short stay rules to people that are visiting into the EU from outside. Now, obviously, that includes the UK at the moment, as they're no longer in the UK. Now, that's not because of Brexit. It's because the EU are extending the residency and living requirements for everybody within the EU, EU citizens and non-EU citizens, through the changes to the Schengen zone, which were due to come in force in full this year from May 23, although they have been deferred into next year. And there's also going to be a requirement for electronic travel authorities as well. This is not just the EU, it's also the UK. So the UK are introducing electronic travel authorities, as well as the EU, for anybody that has allowed visa-free travel to a country, but without having to have a visa. So a British person can travel to most EU countries still without a visa, but they will require a travel authority from next year. Now, if you do need a visa for the EU, that's called the Schengen visa, the Schengen zone visa. The Schengen zone is basically the EU, but includes some other countries like Switzerland, Norway, as well. So if you come from outside the EU and you require need a visa, then a Schengen visa is the answer. So the extension of that now is that everybody who's not an EU citizen will require either a Schengen visa or an electronic travel authority to travel into the EU, and that will then allow them to enforce short stay rules. For those of you that follow our tax advice for expats, short stay rules are the essence of international law and have been for a long time. So it's the 90-day trip that you can take without needing a residency permit or an extended stay. So the rules are changing for the EU, and the EU rules in particular, which apply to the Schengen zone, but they're extending to the electronic travel authorities as well, limit you to 90 days in any 6 months. Now that's different to the UK, where you can go and you can actually spend more than 90 days in a 6 month period, although you're not supposed to do more than one 90-day trip. So these things have been monitored now at the airport when you're having facial recognition, fingerprint tests with your biometric passport at the border. Those have been tested for people going in and outside the EU. But within the EU as well, all that the EU citizenship does is grant you freedom of movement. Now, the complication that they've got that is that when you want to live and work abroad in the EU, you need to have a resident permit to get a tax number to get that to be able to then work in that country. So the EU gives freedom of movement, but it doesn't give the freedom of movement to live and work abroad in the EU. The resident permits are still the issue, and that's where the UK news is getting confused. The short stay rules are being introduced and applied to UK citizens because they're outside the EU, and they will be fully enforced from next year. But the answer will be the travel authorities when they come in, or a Schengen visa, or a residency permit. And those are the different levels that you can take to do that. So for more information and guidance on that, contact us at partnership.com. If you own an overseas property or an overseas business, you may need to consider having a residency permit or a short stay, or a residency permit or a electronic travel authority or Schengen visa to allow you to do your business or to stay for longer than 3 months in 6 in your holiday home or when visiting family abroad. So for more information and guidance on that, contact us at partnership.com. So it doesn't apply for short stay visas. Short-term travel, not a problem. It's when you're staying, when you're investing in overseas property, when you're investing in overseas business. And this brings us on to our today's topic, looking at the changes to the Portugal Golden Visa Scheme, which are driven partly by the short stay rules. Portugal have updated their Golden Visa Rules. These have been in the offing for a few years. The EU started legislation in 2019 to update the residency rules for people living and working around the EU. And those came in force after Brexit, coincidentally, but obviously just so that it didn't have to involve the UK who are leaving. So from January 21, so from mid-June 21, after the extended periods of validation, the new EU legislation came in place for a residency when living and working abroad. And Portugal have now updated their scheme. So the Golden Visa in Portugal allows an expat to live and work in Portugal with minimal tax on their worldwide income. So if they're earning income in Portugal, you'll still be taxed on that income and those earnings and those investments in Portugal. So if you invest in an overseas property in Portugal, you know that income is taxable in Portugal. But an expat living on a golden visa in Portugal only gets taxed, doesn't get taxed on their worldwide income in the same way. Now, there's been some revisions over the years, but there's a major change that's come in place now from the end of July 23 that affect expats that are applying for the golden visa. Bear in mind that the golden visa rule lasts for up to 10 years in Portugal. It's not open-ended. It's not necessarily you need to renew that, but after 5 years of living and working in Portugal, you can apply for citizenship. So it has some opportunities there for expats to extend their residency permit to remain beyond the period of the Golden Visa, but as a Portuguese citizen. So it's 5 years to get citizenship in Portugal, similarly to the UK and Ireland. Other countries can be longer, up to 12 years. Anybody with an existing Golden Visa scheme that's not expired or has got a pending application will automatically be converted onto the new Entrepreneur's D2 Golden Visa application, which does include minimum stay requirements, and it does include that you abide by certain rules. So within the EU now, there's generally visitors visas, which are annual renewing, which don't give people a long-term stay rights. They don't give them citizens' rights in terms of medical health care and work permits, but it allows them to stay beyond the short stay period. So you could go to Portugal or another EU country, get a visitor's visa, and as long as you can confirm that you can support yourself during that year, you can get that residency permit to stay in Portugal or another EU country for up to a year, but without local citizens' rights. The Golden Visa is a resident permit, and therefore you get the equivalent of the citizens' rights. But like with the visitor's visa, if you don't stay in the country for sufficient period of time, you can lose that visa. So there's minimum stay requirements that you need to perform for it to remain efficient and effective. But, a visitor's visa, 1 year, you don't get a tax residency on that. And if you're outside Portugal or an EU country for more than 90 days, technically that visitor's visa, which would be running for 6 months to a year, would lapse automatically. That's not necessarily enforced fully yet, but this is where the system is going to. But over the period of your Golden Visa, you have got a minimum time that you need to be in country to do that. So if you spend more than 2 years in 5 outside a country, that you wanted to then go and apply for citizenship, that will be a disqualifying feature, for example. So if you're applying for a Portuguese Golden Visa, the new requirements now essentially require you to have a significant amount of capital invested in Portugal. And this needs to be, and the emphasis has moved away from real estate into business. So that the Portuguese now are looking not for people to buy apartments and villas as holiday homes in Portugal. And people with holiday homes in Spain, for example, will know that they can't let those out because they can't get a permit to let those out and as a holiday home. So it's moving away from that property investment into a job creation scheme. So what they're looking for is different versions of the Portugal scheme that you can qualify on, which essentially means an investment between 250 and 500,000 euros in an enterprise type of scheme. So all existing people will be converted to an entrepreneurial resident permit, the D2. But new applications would look between 250 and 500,000, depending upon what type of business that you're bringing into Portugal and how many jobs you're creating. So you may be required to create 10 jobs, for example. You could have a requirement for capital. So your business could be in research. So if you're setting up a research business, a scientific business, to do that study in Portugal for 500,000. That would be one way to get a residency permit there. If it was a public amenity, a public service, arts, the investment could be 250,000 euros. If you wanted to get into some form of real estate investment or create a headquarters for your business, then it's a 500,000 capital investment into the country to apply for the Golden Visa, which will give you tax-free for up to 10 years on your worldwide income, but not income and capital gains arising in Portugal. So in summary, the Portugal Golden Visa scheme remains very attractive, but it's also to be seen that it does now require and move people away from investing in property as a way of gaining the residency and automated residency, to actually be able to validate and prove that they have sufficient income and means to serve themselves. That can be through capital alone, or it can be from income that supports that capital. And depending upon the field in which you're investing in Portugal, whether it's scientific or research, whether it's a public amenity or a general commercial business, or if it's a headquarter type of business, whatever the nature of that determines the amount of capital and income that you need to be able to support yourself. Don't forget that when you move into working in any country, you're then going to be required to pay into a social insurance scheme as well, or a state healthcare scheme, especially in the EU. Those things are always prevalent. So they're considerations as well. So thanks a lot for listening. I've got no questions that are coming to me at the moment. So what I'm going to do now is just summarize again what we've said today. There's a lot of news at the moment about short stay complications for British expats travelling for long vacations in the EU. EU law changed in 2019. It's been introduced post-Brexit. And with the extension of the Schengen zone into travel authorities in 2024 in the EU, but also in the UK, they're being introduced. It means that with the travel authority or a visa, that is the only way you can stay for an extended stay over the short stay period. In countries like the UK, you've got more flexibility to stay up to 6 months, but in the EU, in the Schengen zone area where the travel authority will apply, you're limited to 90 days in 180. And so those restrictions will be extended. And because of that, EU countries are changing the rules about expats and guiding them more to allow freedom of movement of EU citizens, but looking for external investors who are investing large sums of capital into business. And for Portugal now, are looking for business investors that are creating jobs in Portugal, either for research, scientific purposes, or a public service, a general commercial business, or headquarters of a business, where you'll need between 250 and 500,000 to invest in that. If you've already got a residence in Portugal, you can remain there for the period of your extended golden period. Once the golden visa finishes, it could be that you have to pay the local taxes. Citizenship is available in Portugal, or you can relocate living and working abroad. For more information and guidance, contact us at proactpartnership.com. You can book a free review online with the team, or you can book a consultant's review. We've got services that are available directly if you want to report an investigation into anything you want to do regarding running your business, relocating your business, or buying property and getting the residency permits to allow you to be living and working abroad. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you again next time. So that concludes our YouTube webinar. Thanks a lot for listening.